Yo, what's going on, everybody? Wizard101 here. Y'all guys come with the Tiger, and today we're back playing some more Wizard101. Today is another video that I've been wanting to make for a while, which is very similar to the one that I just uploaded not too long ago, a very recent video, my top 10 favorite worlds in Wizard101. This is my top 10 favorite dungeons in Wizard101. This is a video I've been wanting to make for a while, just like the other one, and we're going to have a similar introduction here. And yeah, so like I said, a little bit longer video, just like the last video. But we'll be talking about my top 10 favorite dungeons, why I like them, etc., etc. If you guys have not seen my last top 10, check that out. That'll be right up here in this little corner if you're interested. And then as we go over these top 10 dungeons, I gotta say, I tried not to make them so close to each other. I wanted them to be more unique in their own, have like 10 completely unrelatable dungeons. But the truth is, I just couldn't do that. I picked my top 10 favorite dungeons. Yes, some of them are in the same world. Some of them are very similar, but I really can't help that. I do have an honorable mention as well before we get to the first place, just like we did last video. But without further ado, guys, here we go. My top 10 dungeons. My top 10 favorite dungeons in Wizard101. Starting out with number 10, we have Ghost Avalon. This is a famous dungeon up in the higher levels, the mysterious stairway that takes you into the past of what Avalon once was. This dungeon is very unique, I think. This dungeon deals with time travel. It has this sense of fantasy in it. It's a pretty good origin story, if you ask me. This dungeon is where we learn about Morganth and where she is from. We learn a little bit about Ambrose's past in this dungeon. We kind of learn where her motives are, really why she's doing what she's doing. This is where she came from. This dungeon just kind of, well, not kind of, it literally takes you back in time, where you can see what Avalon was before everything that happened with Malastare and even everything before that. This dungeon is very unique to where this time travel is really the only things that can match it is probably the Vault dungeon in Spire, where you go back in time to where Spire was back before it was destroyed in chaos. And then it's also comparable to the Five Boxes event, where we go back to Malastare and Cyrus when they were younger, before Ravenwood and all that. This dungeon just takes you back in time, where we get to meet Morganth and the whole story behind her, where she really originates. So let's just go and step in real quick. Sir Patrick standing over there. And we get to come in as Gamma and give you like the random pet name or something. And this dungeon, I remember honestly quite a few bugs with this dungeon that I could think before in the past. Is this the updated Gamma model? I think it is. I can't tell. I really don't know. But a really cool fantasy fairy tale origin. We kind of learn what happened to King Artorias. That kind of thing. So a really unique, memorable dungeon. Without further ado, guys, number 9. Coming in number 9 is the dungeon Tartarus. However you want to pronounce it, from Greek mythology. Like I said, I love Greek mythology. So this dungeon had to be somewhere on my list. And this is kind of a weird dungeon to be placed on my list. That because I've only done this dungeon one time. And it was actually quite recently. Well, not necessarily recently. Probably when I was around Polaris level is when I first did this dungeon with War Machine. Because I never really attempted the Aquila dungeons until I was above level. But that's besides the point. But this dungeon is very unique. And even though I've only done it once, there's just so much about this dungeon that I admire. Down to the detail. Like I said, I really do like Greek mythology. I love Greek mythology. I think it's really fascinating. And it's fun to learn about. And I like how Aquila has this whole Greek mythology theme based off of to it. And here, you know, we stand in the land of the dead, where eventually we would have to fight Hades and then his two other brothers, Zeus and Poseidon. I believe somewhere, I don't think it's here. I really don't even know where it is, I can't remember. But somewhere in this dungeon is Kronos, the secret boss, the Titan of Time, boss that's well farmed even today. The Gladiator and Kronos, they are like these two very famous bosses that you farm for whether you're getting Amber, Braided Vines. There he is. Not exactly an easy dungeon, but not necessarily difficult. It just takes a little while to beat him. I've only battled him a couple times myself. But the amount of detail in this dungeon is really incredible. Even though I've only done this once, I can really say that there was a lot of work put into creating this dungeon. Just looking at the architecture and the amount of visual representation here is just truly breathtaking. If we look at the map here, it's not like really quite a crazy map. We got a few noticeable things. We got Medusa down here. Charon from Greek mythology, the one that carries you across the river Styx. And then we got like Hades Palace at the very end of this. It's a very interesting dungeon, very unique dungeon, and we get to also fight the three-headed dog, Cerberus. A very unique dungeon. I really do like the amount of design, the kind of like little animation effects that were put in this dungeon. It's very, very lively. This was a very popular dungeon when it first came out too. Actually, as a matter of fact, it still is. But even today, a lot of people, not necessarily me, I've never really farmed or really cared to farm this dungeon for level 90 gear. But level 90 gear was kind of the hype when this dungeon came out. People would come to, oh hello, people would farm this dungeon for, I believe, an Atham and a ring, and then of course, whatever level 90 Hades gear comes here. But I remember the Atham and the ring were pretty big, and people would farm that a lot. And I even know people today will still farm Tartarus for that same gear. Definitely a dungeon. This isn't exactly a breeze dungeon. This is a dungeon that kind of, it takes you a bit. It takes you a little bit, you know, to get through, but eventually you can do it. This is a dungeon where really it's kind of, it's iconic, even though it's not significant to the Wizard101 storyline. It is still iconic among many people, both younger and higher up wizards. Definitely representative. This dungeon kind of, like I said, it takes a while. It's got its own little mini story. It's got puzzles. It's got multiple bosses, minions. I don't know. There's just a lot to this dungeon. Like I said, I've only done this once, although I thought it was pretty cool. So whatever that says. But yeah. So number 9 is Hades in Tartarus, a wonderful dungeon. On to number 8. Coming in number 8, we have Big Ben. This dungeon is really rememberable, yet forgetful at the same time. If that makes any sense. This dungeon is, I really don't know another way to describe it. It has a basic concept. It's just a standard tower dungeon. It has, I think, 10 or 15 floors, something like that, and it has like little containers of milk that you spill for a random reason. But anyway, this dungeon is very iconic. It's definitely memorable when you're questing through, because this is the end of the first 3 worlds you get to. You really don't know what to expect after this. This is your little stepping stone into Mushu. I really don't know really much to say about this dungeon. The world itself, you know, is based off of London, 18th, 19th century London. I just realized it's got the Fang over here. Interesting. It's based off 18th, 19th century London. The overall feel of this world, the very classical feel, the nighttime mystery feel, really contributed to how this dungeon would be interpreted among the people who come to this dungeon. It's just, I don't know, there's a whole feel when you're going through this dungeon for the first time that is really, you don't really feel it when you go through the dungeon any other time. But just for that soul memory, doing this for the very first time to defeat Meowiarty, that itself just has a lot of memory and emotion to it, and that's why I had to put this somewhere on the list. These last few dungeon spots are kind of interchangeable, as most top 10s will be. But this dungeon, it had to be somewhere on the list, and I really wasn't sure where to put it, and it just popped in my head when I was thinking of this place. Yeah, I really don't have anything else to say about it. Just a good conclusion to Marleybone, in my opinion. Yeah, that's all I really got to say about it. I don't know. I mean, you do it for the first time, it definitely makes the top list somewhere. But after that, it doesn't really feel that significant, especially when you get further in the game, when you have like these similar tower-like dungeons. But Big Ben was kind of the first of its kind, and I think that's why it really struck a everlasting impression among the players that reached this dungeon. Definitely a memorable one. Number 8, Big Ben. Who am I kidding? We'll go in the dungeon. I mean, it's just a tower, nothing fancy. It's got these nice little ponds, though, on the side of it I never noticed. Yep, just your standard clock tower. Alright, on to number 7. Coming in number 7, we have the Great Spire dungeon, the conclusion of Dragon Spire in the first arc, the end of Malastare. This dungeon had to be somewhere on the list. This is a classic dungeon that, of course, every player in Wizard101 past level 50 will remember that, and then every wizard below level 50 looks forward to. A dungeon that is simultaneously loved, extremely hyped for, and dread at the same time, because it kind of makes you feel like you're finishing something and you really don't know what the purpose of the game will be afterwards. I don't know, that's the whole feel of this dungeon when you get there for the first time. You're just really excited, but you just really don't know what to expect afterwards, so it's kind of weird putting it into something that you've been doing for so long. But the Great Spire dungeon had to make the list. Number 7, this dungeon is very iconic. We ride the young battle drake that we spend like a third of the world questing through to hatch. We ride him up here in this tower, which we take a teleporter back to there instead of riding the dragon back, but that's besides the point. We come here to defeat Malastare. We learn that he is ready to awaken the Dragon Titan to use his power to resurrect Sylvia. We have this really cool cutscene animation that has been updated in the recent graphical update by King's Owl.
You were about to...
Whoops, I did not want to not show that anymore, but whatever. So we come in here. We learn that this is where Malastare is going to be. This is kind of like the end, the very end point. We defeat Malastare, and then he's actually defeated. He's not okay, I'm done, I'll back off. He's actually defeated. He becomes a ghost, and then he fades away with Sylvia. And yeah, that pretty much wraps up the conclusion. A very emotional storyline. This dungeon is memorable. I mean, really, for the design of it, I don't know why, but I felt like it was just missing something. I like the idea of like the chains and the like little volcano here. I don't know. There's just something I feel like it was missing. But I don't know. Definitely, it's really cool seeing Malastare just floating there, ready to fight. Kind of. You know, it's either we fight and win, or, you know, we give up, or we die, you know, that kind of thing. Malastare has received various nerfs throughout time. I couldn't tell you if I played this long or not. I just know about this. I don't know when this was changed. But Malastare was at one point the hardest boss in the game at 100,000 health. That has since then changed. I think he only has either 7,000 or 14,000 or 28,000, something like that. I think 14,000. I should know this. I just did this dungeon on my eyes not that long ago, but definitely a changing but iconic boss. Memorable, very unique dungeon. The design of it itself is very unique in the heart of a volcano. I don't think we've ever had another dungeon that took place like inside a volcano that I can think of. So yeah, very nostalgic memories coming through here. But yeah, so that is number 7. Here we go to number 6. Coming in number 6, we have Krakatoa in the Temple of Storms. This dungeon is, I think, very nostalgic but easily forgotten about. This dungeon is the wrap-up of Krakatoa, the second world in the story arc, and it's a stepping stone. We go to Marleybone afterwards, but this is kind of the wrap-up of the second world. It's the same feeling that we got when we defeated Nightshade and Wizard City. We really weren't sure exactly what to expect afterwards. We didn't know what the worlds were going to be like. We came to Krakatoa, and now we're like, okay, so this is the end. Now what's going to happen? What's this third world going to be like? So a lot of various like elements of hype, very curious feelings. This dungeon is kind of strange. So I felt like it wasn't really expected when we got here. We weren't sure how long this area would take. I do believe this is the shortest area in Krakatoa. But I had to get this dungeon somewhere on my list. Krakatoa, my #1 favorite world. I had to put this dungeon somewhere on the list because it is very memorable. Defeating Krakatoa through the help of the Order of the Fang and Krakatoa. This dungeon is just very, very unique in its way. We have, like, I believe this is the dungeon with the various tests that we have to go through. Yeah, the temple gatekeeper we have to go through and be, like, his trial of strength, his trial of mind. An overall very pleasing dungeon for a very pleasing world, in my opinion. The amount of just, I don't know, the sheer dynamic color and feel that you get in this world. Like, I really do feel like I'm in a spooky pyramid when you go through here. And this dungeon, I feel like, concluded that vibe of Krakatoa, of like open sunshine and happiness outside, and then you come inside to like the dark tube. And this was a perfect wrap up for the world of Krakatoa. Definitely a very memorable dungeon. I truly enjoyed doing this dungeon. Just very, very, very memorable. But on to number 5. Coming in number 5, we have Shirataki Temple. This is a dungeon that is kind of very unique in its own way. Very representative of Mushu. Kind of like it continues to the entire feel of like the mass exploration vibe that Mushu has. We come into this temple dungeon. I'm not gonna lie, guys. I can't remember a whole lot about why we come into this dungeon. I know the Wavebringer's in here. I just recently actually helped a person out with this dungeon, and it wasn't too long ago that I did it myself with my eyes. But very interesting. I think it's a very unique dungeon. We have this vast exploration bamboo forest, and then we got the like lake and the river. We got like the final dojo over there, the dojo. We have the Wavebringer and the Spell Trainer back here as well. We're going to go take a look at that. But this dungeon is very representative of Mushu. I actually had a really hard time trying to place number 5 and number 6. I knew it would be Krakatoa in the Temple of Storms, and I knew it would be Shirataki Temple of Mushu, but I really couldn't decide what the order would be to place them. So what I ultimately decided to do was to flip them around and keep moving back and forwards, and then I decided this one could be 6, could be 5, I really don't know. But this dungeon's kind of unique as it holds this just kind of positive vibe, I guess you could say, very spiritual vibe. And it's kind of a little mini expedition, a little mini journey of the soul through here. We got like this beautiful landscape with water flowing around that center maple tree. The Wavebringer up here. This dungeon's really not matched by any other dungeon. I don't think you could really compare it. We got the Wavebringer in here that doesn't spawn until you do the quests. But a very memorable dungeon. We got, like I said, we got like a little oyster thing. I forgot about that. We come through here, and you got the cool little dojo room back here, and the secret trainer in the very back. So definitely a very memorable dungeon. Both memorable and forgotten. This dungeon really holds significance in the world of Mushu, and it's very well designed. I love the design, the architecture of it. A very breathtaking dungeon in a very unique world. And this was kind of nearing the wrap-up of Mushu. I believe this will be about 2/3 of the way through Mushu. Maybe a little bit less. But a very, very, I think, really cool, unique dungeon. that I think is really lovable among anyone who comes in here. You do have to go to like the 4 shrines here and defeat the bosses and or minions there. I think it was a combination to light the braziers to spawn Wavebringer and get through here. But a very memorable dungeon. I like this. Definitely one of my favorites. Very unique. But on to number 4. Number 4 may actually come into a surprise. We are back in Krakatoa. Number 4 has to go to the Throne Room of Fire, aka the Map Room. This dungeon was one of the first dungeons that we ever really have done in this game, and I can't really remember. I mean, if you do Sunken City, the side quest dungeon in Wizard City, that's probably the first dungeon that we've done, but I don't think we've done any other dungeon in this game. I believe this is the first one. I could be wrong, but I believe this is the first one. And it's kind of a lot of memories with this one, because you come here and you just see dungeon warning. You're not used to a dungeon warning before. You know something's going to be different about it, and it's very unique. I really don't know any other dungeon that's like this. We have a literal landscape map. I'm trying to think, we call a replica. We have a whole replica right here of Krakatoa, which I think is just a really unique touch to the dungeon. I have a lot of fun with this one. It's a personal fan favorite. I love doing this the first time, and I actually used to farm this years ago. Back when I first started playing, I'd farm this dungeon. I actually did a lot of farming in Krakatoa, and this dungeon has a lot of memories with that. I've helped other players with this dungeon. It's just kind of... It's very unique. It's a significant stepping stone, because like I said, I don't believe there's any other dungeons that you go to before this one. And so this is kind of like the original dungeon that I think a lot of people actually forget about. But there's definitely a lot of memories with this. We come here because we're looking for, I want to say, it's either the Fang Harp, or the Fang Harp, you know, I think it's called the Fang Harp. I don't even remember the Fang that we saw in Marleybone that you get at the end of this world to defeat the Crocs. But we come here looking for it, and we get this staff, because the staff is supposed to like show where it's located. And we place the staff up here on the pedestal, and this is actually a glitch, by the way. There's a glitch. I don't know exactly how it works, but if you put the staff on here, sometimes one of the other players will not get credit. If there's more than one person's dungeon, one of them might not get credit for placing the staff, and it won't let you place it back down, so you have to do the whole dungeon over again. That happened to a friend of mine that I was helping quest. But anyway, so that's the thing, but the staff will shine wherever the Fang is located, and this is the end of the Pyramid of the Sun here. We've reached the end, we're looking for it, and then the light shines over here on the Crocus Sphinx, and we learn that the Fang is over here. So then we have to go over there, and then it just kicks off the rest of Krakatoa. But a very unique dungeon, and actually kind of makes you wonder, is this what it looks like underneath Krakatoa? I never thought about it. I'm pretty sure it doesn't. But like way down, I wonder if there's like some kind of little sand pit, or if that's just, you know, just contributes to the design of the replica here, which probably just contributes to the design. But I think it's really cool that you can see Krakatoa piece by piece. And something that I think is really cool is the fact, and there isn't a boat here, which is kind of saddening. I just realized there's not a boat over there either at this dock. I just realized the 2 boats are missing. The one that goes to these islands, and then the one that goes over here to the part of the 4 dungeons. What? I mean, I don't know. This is probably like an ancient map, right? So this kind of shows Krakatoa before, maybe. But I believe Krakatoa used to be like all together at one point. I don't even know. But I don't know. It's still a really cool, unique dungeon nonetheless. I don't really know any other dungeon that's like this. Any other dungeon that really compares. It's got wandering bosses. It's got, I don't know, it's very unique and a wonderful little dungeon in the world of Krakatoa. But this is my number 3. A very unexpected spot, most likely. But on to number 2. Coming in my number 3 spot, we have Castle Darkmoor. One of the most memorable dungeons, one of the most anticipated dungeons in the game. Yes, this is number 3. I just mixed up the numbers by accident. I thought we were number 2. I'm sorry. I didn't realize it's number 3. But here we are with number 3. Number 3 is Darkmoor, Castle Darkmoor. It is a very unique dungeon, somewhat random, and very special to a lot of people, really. This is technically 3 dungeons, but I'm just going to throw them all together since they're just, back to back, all in one area. But Castle Darkmoor is really just meant to play all together. Maybe with little breaks in between, of course. They're 2-hour-long dungeons each, but Castle Darkmoor is it's all lined up. Spooky. Castle Darkmoor is one of the most anticipated dungeons, because we learn that Malistaire actually, spoiler alert, has returned from his death, his demise in Dragon Spire. We learn that he comes back, and he is now this, kind of king of death, very powerful, just basically Lord of Shadow, really. And he comes back, and he has issued the Law of Kandavasi, which is a challenge between, you and him. And so that brings us here. And, so then we come here. We have to go through the 3 dungeons, defeat his minions, make our way through. And this is where we learn, really, our first advanced shadow spell, which is our level 100 shadow spell, bugs, fire from above, any other spell you can think of, Abominable Weaver. I'm really excited to get that one on my ice. I wanted to hit Darkmoor on my ice by the end of the year, but I don't know if we'll be able to do that. Running out of time. But anyway, Darkmoor is a fan-favorite dungeon. Very memorable, very spooky place. And I believe, it's actually where we learned that Dorgan grew up here, I believe, when he was little. And you can read about that in the, or really watch it on the Ravenwood Roll Call series on the King's Isle YouTube channel. But we come here. Malistaire is kind of at the very tippity top of the tower with this dragon. Kind of a longer sequence of dungeons. Combined, it's about somewhere to 4 to 6 hours roundabout to beat every dungeon. In each dungeon, the bosses have cheats. Each one of them has their own little unique feel to it. And then they all contribute to the story about how Malistaire has returned from vengeance, but we can actually beat him and release his spirit to rest with Sylvia. The thing with this dungeon is it's interesting because each dungeon has its own little difficulty, and I don't know if it's just me, but the second dungeon seems the hardest. When you look at all these, we got the Graveyard, Darkmoor, I think Manor, and Darkmoor Hallway, something like that. I don't know the exact name. But we learned that we have to do all 3 of these, and to me, the second one is the hardest. The first one is probably easy, the second one is the hardest for me. Third one can be easy if you have a good team, because the third one is Malistaire himself, and you have to really just combat him and know his cheats well, and know exactly what to put in your deck, and when to use what, etc. Definitely a more interesting, unique dungeon. I really don't think we're going to have anything quite like this in the future. Although with the speculation of the Hole in Old Town and level 130 being a thing, and now growing needs for higher level gear, because we're still using a lot of wizards today will still use Malistaire gear, and that's truly understandable. In fact, I'm using the Malistaire robe right now, the Malistaire Cloak of Flux. But eventually, this dungeon, it's kind of weird to think about, because this dungeon is one of the most well-known dungeons in the game. And it's kind of interesting when you look at it, because one day this dungeon might just be completely unnecessary. We never know. I really hope that we have a big dungeon that left the same lasting imprint that Darkmoor did. Everyone was excited to do this dungeon. Everyone was excited to get their first school shadow magic spell. Everyone was just really excited to do this, and left an everlasting impression on players. And I really hope that a new dungeon that comes soon, hopefully that will come soon, I don't know if any dungeon like that will be coming or not. It's all speculation, but I really do hope that we get another big dungeon that has the same image as Darkmoor. A lot of good times in this dungeon. This was probably the first, I guess, dungeon farm for me, really. So I mean, I never really farmed Olympus until my Ice Wizard, but I've never really farmed that many dungeons, honestly, or never really farmed a lot. But Darkmoor, I've had to have run at least 10, 20 times, probably at least around 20 times trying to get gear and helping other people out. So definitely a lot of memories with Darkmoor in terms of helping others, getting gear, stuff like that. Very unique dungeon, had to make the top 3. But now, on to the real number 2. Number 2, we have Atlantis, the underwater dungeon. Atlantia, I guess not technically Atlantis, but really Atlantis, but Atlantia. Y'all guys know that this dungeon would have to be on my list somewhere. This one's a little bit of a weird dungeon to put on my list. It's very similar to how I put Tartarus on this list. It deserved a really high spot because I personally love this dungeon. Now, number 1 and number 2, they were really just really close, and I chose number 1 for a slightly different reason than I did for number 2. So number 1 and number 2, I actually feel like I need to keep switching around. But so over here in Tartarus, when we go to defeat Hades, before we go there, we actually come to Atlantia, a dungeon where it continues the Aquila, however you want to say it, saga. I say Aquila. It might be Aquila, I don't know. I say Aquila. But Mount Olympus is a very unique dungeon, and then we go from Mount Olympus over here to Atlantia to confront Poseidon, because we continue onward with the Immortal Games. And this is one of my favorite dungeons because I love like this underwater, sea, ocean themed. Really, I mean, I love that idea. It's a really amazing concept, and the fact that we're in this beautiful world and we have a dungeon like Atlantia, which my favorite Greek figure that I think I might have said in this video or another video is Poseidon. So this underwater dungeon just had to earn a favorite somewhere on my list. It has a very unique map. Of course, just like the other dungeons, it has its own boss right here, its own little secret boss, the Sand Squid. And then, really, it's just a amazing underwater map that I really had a lot of fun questing with. I've only done this dungeon a couple times. One time to the dungeon, one time to defeat the Sand Squid, and then a couple times just to help others out and to defeat the Sand Squid with them, to help them out with that. So this dungeon's kind of interesting, kind of weird to put on the list, but I knew I had to go on the list somewhere. It's a really cool dungeon. I love ocean themed stuff, like I was saying. Yeah, it's very unique compared to the other underwater battles that we've done. It has different architecture, you know, different mobs, and then at the end we defeat Poseidon. So a very colorful, vibrant. You see, I say that, but everything's blue. But I believe there's other dungeons in here where it's got like bright glowing coral, and I think there's one place where the sun like shines through the water. But yeah, just a very unique, favorable dungeon. Now, just going off what I just said, you guys could probably figure out my number 1. And if you guys haven't already, here's my number 1. Now, this isn't my number 1. This is an honorable mention. But an honorable mention that I had to put 2 was Xibalba. Xibalba, how you want to pronounce it, the meteor that's in the sky that we used to be able to see before it shattered and rained fire down on Azteca. But Xibalba is a very iconic dungeon. This is the wrap-up of Azteca. We learn that Morganth has risen Malistaire, and he just came back from vengeance and fused with shadow magic. Yeah, that's the yeah, we're literally on Xibalba right now. But we make our way up there, and we find out that Malistaire is here, and we kind of fight him, and then he gets casted out into the sky, and where he actually lands in Castle Darkmoor and issues the challenge of Kandavasi. So a very very unique dungeon here. Not personally one of my favorites. In fact, I actually kind of forgot about this dungeon, not gonna lie, but I was just thinking about that when I was writing down my list. And it just deserved an honorable mention. So this is an honorable mention. Now on to my number 1. You guys had to have guessed it. Number 1 is Mount Olympus. a very iconic dungeon to everyone. One of the first major dungeons that we actually come across at level 30 when we get invited to the Immortal Games. So let's get into this dungeon. There's a lot of reasons why this is number 1. This was the first kind of big dungeon that I really did multiple times, and I actually put this dungeon off. I was probably around level 40, 45 before I even knew what this was, before I even started it. I actually completely forgot about it, and I believe Zeus used to have cheats. If I'm correct, I think Zeus used to have cheats. He would go first every time or something like that, or skip a turn. I don't know. He might not have had cheats, but that's what's in my head. But we come to Mount Olympus for the Immortal Games with a very unique design, very unique quest line here. We got to defeat a few of the different Olympian gods here to work our way up to Zeus to be able to defeat him and move on forward in the Immortal Games. Each room has its own little unique appearance. The quest line is very unique. We have to defeat various minions. We have to, I can't go in because the door's locked, so I haven't talked to Athena yet. We have to defeat various minions. We defeat Apollo. We defeat, we're supposed to defeat Artemis, but she's gone. We defeat a centaur instead. We talk to Hephaestus, however you want to pronounce it. That's a whole nother deal there with his pronunciation. We got the secret gladiator fight for level 90, where people farm for amber and braided vines down there, and as well as the puzzle here in the pit of the Noxy. We have to defeat the lady if we get the puzzle wrong, or defeat the snake people, something like that. I haven't done that puzzle in so long. Well, I haven't lost that puzzle in so long, I should say. But aside from that, one of the reasons why this dungeon is number 1 is because not only because it's Greek mythology themed, but because this dungeon holds great importance. I've done this with various players, helping them get gear. I never did it for gear, but later on I actually, you can see this on the channel, when my eyes hit level 30, I actually streamed this like 5, 6, 7 times, a couple runs each time. So I've had a lot of experiences with y'all guys. I have a lot of screenshots, a lot of clips of me doing this with y'all guys, and this dungeon has left an everlasting impression because of that. And we can also see the Greek statues here. So we got Poseidon, Apollo. That might be Artemis. I really can't tell. I think this is Apollo. Ares. We got to fight him too. Hephaestus, Kronos. I think that's Athena. Yeah. So a very unique dungeon, one that's just really unforgettable. And then in the end we defeat Zeus. So, very memorable. Even collecting the stone statues. I remember trying to find those for the first time. Definitely a challenge, but a very just memorable dungeon I have a lot of memories with. So now that y'all guys have seen my top 10, what is y'all guys' top 10 favorite dungeons? So let's add it down in the comments below, because I'd love to read through them. I read all your guys' comments. But yeah, so we'll wrap up my latest top 10 video. Hopefully you guys did enjoy. If you guys have any other top 10 videos you guys want to see, make sure to leave that down in the comments as well. But yeah, so that's all I got. Thank you guys for watching, and until my next video, I will see y'all guys next time. I was Hat93 out.